contributions. Okay, we talked about this the other day, and I kind of stopped because I knew I was using one phrase instead of a different one. This one here wasn't an ideology. It is called a paradigm, and it's just your belief system. And here you have a brand new word, paradigm. Has anybody heard of that word before, paradigm? Yes? All it equals is your belief system. So it's a new word, but it's a word that is based on your way of thinking. So if you were or weren't here, we looked at these bubbles. These represent individuals or voters. And every voter has their combination of the things that are important to them, but also at different levels or degrees of importance. And so for one voter, they might say, okay, yeah, I also care about taxes. I care about free trade or trade to other countries. I care about the abortion topic or gay marriage in my country. But you can see that these are written in small and not bolded text because they care about them, but they're not the number one thing that they're going to vote on. And the things that are more important to them that will determine who they actually vote for or how they support somebody might be things like, competition in work place or gaining wealth and that kind of stuff. Versus somebody else that might set those other issues as their priority, and they also care about these other things, but not to the same degree. And so the idea here is that every individual, every voter, every person has their own compilation or collection of things that are important to them. But just because you might fit within a certain political party doesn't mean that you agree with every element of their platform. You might be with them for most of what they believe in, but be a little bit more on the left or right side of other things. But you have to pick the one that does best suit you. So the goal of this was to look at, this is the political spectrum here of center, left, and right. And this is kind of where the parties, Alexa, I'm not projecting, am I? Can you hear me? Yes, it says my speakers are muted. I don't know why. I'm going to start presenting. You were going to go that whole class and not tell me, weren't you? Tisk,
yeah.
Tisk. Got to help me out here. Okay, so there's that. Okay, and the idea here is that these different political parties kind of move around themselves on the left and right spectrum as society adjusts and changes, as voters adjust and change. And so what you should get from this handout, and I'll print this out and share this with you, is that each one of you is one of these heads in a circle. This one is Sophia. I can take the time to draw it out, whatever, but you're having a bad hair day. No, I'm just kidding. But each one of these is you, and you have your own collection of values. And that collection of values that's unique to you is called your paradigm. And your paradigm is going to be different than Levi's paradigm or Sophia's paradigm because they're not identical.
Very similar.
They can be similar, but also if you think, even if they're similar, let's say that there are two heads that have the same list of, say, 5 priorities. And it can be very similar because they might even grow up in the same house. The ones that they set at the top might be different. To them, this one might be more, if you look like that, whereas the other person might organize what's their priority a bit different. So there can be a great similarity, but not identical usually. Okay, and then it's that paradigm that you individually have. And for the most part, tell me where you think your paradigm at this point comes from. Because you all kind of have an idea of what you believe in a number of the different topics that we discussed: taxation, sharing money to other countries, immigration, abortion rights, equality of women in our society, what to do with criminals, all of those kinds of topics. You have an idea and you wanted to talk a lot about it. And that was one thing I was very impressed with the other day, is that these are things that you were interested in discussing. But where do you think your idea or belief of those things comes from? How has it been shaped and formed so far?
And formed by what our parents.
Very much so by what your parents think.
And
yes.
Like your family and sometimes like social media.
It can be your external.
What you've seen.
It can be your greater family, so like grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And when you comment on social media, one thing about social media is like oftentimes a lot of our friends will be similarly like-minded, right? Sophia?
Another one could be a religion too.
Yes, a religion can certainly influence that, or lack of religion, that kind of stuff there. Tara?
The way you believe.
We're asking, where does that come from? What influences the way you believe? And so here's the second question. Let's say that you're situated in a certain spot on this political paradigm. Do you expect or anticipate, Topanga, you as well, do you think that you will move your position on this spectrum in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30? What's that?
No.
You don't think?
I don't think I will.
Why not?
I don't know, because I'm very locked in what I believe.
Okay. Do you think you have enough, like, of your own experience to really rely on those judgments?
Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think like maybe slightly, but not much.
Yeah.
So you think you might move,
Maybe like a little bit,
but predominantly you'll stay in one
Yeah,
kind of
one
with one kind of party. Janelle, can I ask what you were going to say?
I think I would probably move around because I don't like. Yeah, I think I would move.
It's just your gut answer is that
Yeah.
you'll probably be a bit flexible. Okay. You can consider that as well, because you'll go out to have your own personal experiences. And as you do, you'll filter that belief system, this pink circle or paradigm that you have. And your own unique experiences might only reinforce the belief that you have already. Or it might challenge some of those beliefs, right? And so, yeah, that's how that works. So if we move on to the handout, excuse me, you guys will notice, guys and girls will notice that we're starting at a different number. We left off at number 3. And we've excluded some stuff so that we can move on into our unit 2. And we might come back and cover some of it. We'll find out, we'll see. You remember the what?
The poem of the
Yes.
blind men and the elephant.
Yes, the 6 Men of Hindustan. Yeah, if you guys, so the grade 9s won't know about this, but some of the grade 10s selected this poem. And it was 6 blind men that approached an elephant, but they all ended up touching a different part of the elephant. And so based on the part that they were touching, they all had a different impression of what the thing or the object was that they were touching. So for example, for the man that touched the tail, his perception was, well, this must be a rope. Somebody else that touched, a big heavy leg or something thought that it was a tree trunk. A tall thing was a wall. Somebody grabbed the ear. But the idea here is that they all have different perspectives. But it was based on differing experiences. Can I ask what you're doing? You taking notes? Okay. Okay. And so that's what we're talking about here, is where this ideal, like a personal perspective comes from. So that's what we're starting with. And I don't expect that we'll take too much time on this handout here. But basically, you can put a highlight or a star beside the very last post, because it's kind of the most important thing. Every person has a paradigm or a belief system. But not every person has selected an ideology which is a kind of like a party, formed official belief system. And that's what we'll get to out of this handout. Right? So when the belief system is yours, it's personal, it's flexible, it's pick and choose whatever combination of beliefs you want, bless you. That, when we're talking about that, that's the paradigm. But it looks different once you have formed belief systems, ones that have the expectations and the limitations already laid out. Tara, can you put this above your nose? Thanks. And there's different types, and you've heard some of these phrases: socialism, communism, neoliberals, neoconservatives. There are some formed types of viewpoints. And so when it's a formed, official type of belief system, it's called an ideology. Your belief system is your paradigm. Existing, formed belief system is an ideology.
Religions more.
And a religion is like an ideology. There's the idea of Catholicism, and what it accepts or doesn't accept is formed and official, and it's historic, right? It's pretty consistent. Any group that puts that name or label to it has to follow the same types of behaviors and beliefs. Versus Christian or Anglican or Lutheran, those would be formed historical groups that are consistent throughout, and so that would be considered also like an ideology. And your belief system might fall more in line and be more similar to Catholicism as opposed to being Anglican or something like that. And so again, a religious belief, your personal religious belief, would also be considered a paradigm, but it's the religion itself that could be an ideology, okay? So that's a great representation or metaphor for it. The other thing that's really important out of all of these is that the official political groups that are made are different, for the most part, in what their assumptions are of human nature. Some political parties think that human beings are mostly good and only need further support. And other political parties on a different side of the political spectrum might believe human nature is essentially evil, that every person will steal or take or cheat. And so its expectations of society dictate the rules it creates for society. And so there are those differences. So when we have political parties, they differ because of what they think of human nature. We also know, and this is pretty obvious to you, that people gravitate. They're drawn to a party that represents them. It's kind of like maybe you and brands. Are any of you kind of drawn to particular brands of clothing, for example, some brands over others?
Yes, I'm very.
Give me an example.
Like a brand.
Sure. What you're drawn to, you like Lululemon? You're drawn to it because of what?
Well, because how comfy it is.
Okay.
And the looks of it.
Okay. And is there a competing brand that you also could give your service, your sales to, but you choose not to?
Not really choose not to, but I prefer Nike and Under Armour.
Yeah. Would make similar types about the athletic.
Usually I pick them.
Okay. So then the other part of that is that you will have brands or name brands or even dance clubs or sports clubs or things like that you want to be a part of. You see yourself represented in their actions, their behavior, their reputation, and so you choose them because they replicate and kind of mirror what you want seen of yourself, and you choose them and you avoid choosing others. Does that part make sense? So the same thing goes for parties. There are some parties that you could rationalize and understand some of the positives of what that party is trying to do or their belief system, but you still see yourself more closely represented by the ideas and values of a different party. And so that's how you end up being part of or aligning yourself with a political idea, is because they represent more of what you yourself feel you set as your priorities, right? So if we're starting off with paradigms here, we're looking at this idea that human beings want to make decisions on important issues based on what they think makes sense in the world or what is reasonable to them, what is realistic. So that's nothing new. We make our best choices and decisions based on our understanding of what the world is about, what makes sense to us from our perspective. Even though, if the make sense thing is compared to this, 3 people could experience much of the same environment, but have different ideas about what makes sense in that environment. Does that make sense? You could write that down. Example, 3 people could experience the same events, but see them differently. Some people will have remembered, or what stands out to them will be different based on their personal experiences. But the whole focus here is that we all make decisions and choose our political parties based on what we think is important or legitimate. For example, going back to this handout, the same thing happens here. This person here is going to choose a party based on what's important to them over other things. And so here they might choose a socially conservative party, or want to give their support to a socially conservative party over a fiscally conservative party, for example, because it's based on what they think is legitimate or most important. And what you think is most important comes back to what your values, beliefs, and ideas are. And so that stuff pretty much makes sense. It's related to your, larger worldview, what you've seen of the world, what you think of the world. And having a type of paradigm or belief system helps you try to understand the things that happen in the world. You've been studying different current event issues. What you think of human nature, if you think people are mostly good or people are mostly bad, that will help filter, your response to the things that you're reading about in the world, right? And this is the important thing, is it becomes your lens, like religion. Religion is a filter of sorts. It tells you how to respond to the world, how to respond to people. Somebody injures you, turn the other cheek, right? And there are many lenses, like different pairs of glasses. There's Hinduism, Buddhism, all sorts of different atheism, different lenses that you can view the world from. And these lenses that we look through determine how we will react to the events around us, right? So that's kind of basic stuff about your thinking system. What's important here is that you recognize that this is something that's long-lasting. It wouldn't be easy to change your perspective on the world. Jaden, do you agree? What do you think it would take? It's especially challenging if you have a pretty good understanding of your belief system and the reasons for it. So if you're someone that kind of maybe knows what they think of the world, but you're not certain of it, do you think that person could more easily change their position based on future experiences? Yes. But take somebody that clearly understands what they think and why they think what they do. It would be a real challenge to change their opinion on something. Try to change somebody's opinion on abortion or on the same-sex marriage. And again, you go back to those things that I might accept this because my country is, but I'm not going to argue and defend it, right? So yeah, there's different, it would be a challenge. So your belief system is a long-lasting pattern of ideas. It's only strengthened over time because the future encounters and experience that you have, you see through your belief system, and it only reinforces and correct. You look at it and say, see, I was correct to think what I was thinking. So what we experience only gets strengthened throughout time. Jess?
It's kind of like the episode in, not Family Guy, but The Simpsons, where a Christian, Lisa tries to change this boy's opinion and change him to Buddhism.
Oh, okay. Doesn't go over well, I'm sure. Okay. I think some
Just add the PS to Buddha.
Yeah, I think was it some people in this room here that asked the question if you think the creators of The Simpsons are time travelers? Is one of you guys?
They predict everything.
I know, they have been so accurate
2020,
on a number of things.
They predicted Trump being president. They predicted the exact
They predicted
I don't know if they're into some voodoo crap.
I don't know, maybe
They
they've maybe, there's a film where Goldie Hawn and some other actresses exchanged their souls for eternal youth, but it doesn't go so well
They
for them.
predicted the 23 Super Bowl, like the Patriots and Falcons, and the
Oh.
Patriots came back down 23 in the.
But also, like, they also are putting out like the most odd combinations of things.
Yeah.
So like, is it not possible that then those odd things happen in the world? Like, it's hard
It
to
makes
say.
you want to ask them what is in stake for the future for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, and Jess brought up that example from The Simpsons, it is very difficult to change somebody's paradigm. So I'll take Sophia as an example. Your belief system, your values, all of that stuff, it's not something that you've like confirmed and checkmarked and you are going with that set of values as of, what are you, 14 years old?
Yeah.
It didn't happen in year 14 or year 13. It's been happening since, year 6, for example, when you could start internalizing that kind of stuff. And throughout that long period of time, you've been informed and seen it modeled for you, decisions and belief systems, and it's been long formed, strengthened over time, and very difficult to change. So this will be an exam question, I could almost guarantee. Anytime you would view a new behavior or a new event, you're going to view it through your paradigm to explain it, right? Why was there no second election? Why did the Liberals win this last election? Like, any of those questions that you have, that you're experiencing it, you're going to filter it, you're going to view it. You can rate the word filter. You're going to filter that experience through your perspective in order to make sense of it. We use our belief systems to make sense of the world. And then we have less confusion, less uncertainty. That connects to a psychology perspective as well, just less mental tension in the world. So an example here is a Christian view of creation is a religious perspective or a viewpoint. That viewpoint or perspective would probably lead someone to be anti-choice on the abortion issue. Right? So a perspective that somebody has affects their choices on future events or how they read behavior in the world. And on the other hand, for example, if somebody has a scientific view of evolution, then they would feel strongly about protecting the environment, right? And so whatever is in your belief system, if you think of these bubbles as luggage or something like that, and you've collected or popped these beliefs and values in there, then that's your filter for all of your experiences. The other thing that's important here is that we know that these paradigms will affect our social contract that we make up. So, for example, in Canada, we have a collective social contract that's based on the majority. The rights and responsibilities of group members are unique in this perspective of thinking compared to other groups. So, for example, in Canada, how we view the rights and responsibilities of Canadians affects how we'll treat each other, right? So, individually we have paradigms, but as a group or a society, our collective viewpoints or paradigms will influence our social choices. Right? So individually you can have that unique perspective, but holistically as a society, there's a majority of us that believe in that sense of equality or protections or things like that. And so it can affect and will affect our social contract as a country. So as a group or society, our collective viewpoints or paradigms will influence our social choices, which influences our social contract. Okay. Hi.
Could you zoom in a bit so I could write it out?
I could, or I can also give you a copy of this. Tara, how's that?
I'd like a copy.
Yeah, that sounds good. That's page 1. Okay, so like I just mentioned, on the next page it starts off and gives an example. Canada collectively has a perspective that we value a sense of equality. Again, it was long being established. It didn't happen overnight. It means that our laws are developed to protect people equally and protect people from abuses of power or from the majority of government itself. Our social contracts reflect that belief of equal rights. So we just finished saying that on the other page. Can you give me another example of a group that has a specific belief that influences their agreement of what people get and leaders give? Yep. Can you give me another example? It doesn't have to be a political party or something. Give me an example of a belief system that influences the social contract of a group. So, for example, say the Girl Guides of Canada is a group, and they would have a social contract of what members have to do or the responsibility of members, what leadership or the organization owes to the individuals who join it, as an example. Or a sports team can be another example of teammanship or integrity, so that there's no cheating or things like that.
Oh, no, integrity, oh no.
Like things are expected.
Sure, so we could say here a group would be a school. There is the value of integrity, for example, which influences the get-give relationship between students and staff. And this get-give relationship is the social contract. Jess, what were you going to say? Do you have another example of a group?
It was like, what's it called again?
Get-give.
And then what does it say after that?
Relationship between students and staff, which is the get-give relationship is the social contract. The agreement between members of the group, right? This is an example of information learned from one unit that we continue to use in additional units, okay? Yes?
Hinduism.
Okay, and how so?
They believe in a higher, they all think the same, or
Okay.
they try to. They all believe the same thing.
Sure, okay. Okay, anybody else? Marissa?
Workplace?
The workplace?
Any place of work where you have coworkers and you have to interact with them?
Yes?
Anywhere you have to interact with someone?
Yes? What would be the shared belief there, for example, though?
Something, probably like collaboration.
Collaboration?
Yeah, collaboration, probably better word for it. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
Collaboration, or you could say here, like that self-regulation that you guys have focused on.
Yeah.
That somebody who is part of a workplace, doesn't matter if they're being monitored or not, or if their boss is watching or not, you're still responsible for the, contributing to the job, right? So a workplace is a good example of a group that has a specific group belief that impacts the social contract agreed there. Tara, last one.
At church,
Yes, how so?
everyone believes that, like, in God.
Yes, yep. Or things like, again, there's the get-give, that you can, that the church leaders are honest, live a certain type of integrity in their lives, and if they fail to live up to that, then they may be asked to leave or things like that, right? Yeah, that kind of stuff. Okay, are we clear about that? Paradigms are your personal belief system. It sometimes lines up accurately with an existing political belief system, but that's got a different name. That's the paradigm. And your belief system is what you rely on to interpret your experiences and what you see in the world and help you make sense of it. And your belief system has been long forming. It is hard to change. And what was the third part that was there? Long forming, hard to change, and only becomes strengthened over time. Okay, so that's what we've discussed so far. We've already kind of asked this question, where do your paradigms start? Right? And so I asked Sophia, where do you think your belief system came from in the beginning? And you said from your family, right? And so it does come from families, and the central part of it comes down to your assumption of what you think about humanity. And specifically, this one here is the thing. This is one of the most important considerations if you're determining what is right and wrong in the world. So did any of you watch the show The Rookie? It's been on for a couple years now. It has Canadian, what's his name on it? He's a Canadian that plays the lead role. It says here, 2 police officers differed in their perspective of what humans were like in general, and they were in conflict, these 2 police officers, and had 2 options. The question was whether people are naturally good and selfish, or whether people are naturally good or whether people are naturally evil versus selfish. If somebody deserves a second chance, or if somebody deserves a consequence on their first offense. So when I asked you guys those questions, you kind of fell between the agree, disagree, strongly agree sides of the fence there, because this is kind of a dividing line between a left side and a right side of thinking. It's human nature. If you think that people should be punished and that it's punishments that keep them from doing wrong, you're sitting slightly to the right. So for example, Lucas, if there were no laws against shoplifting, for example, you might lift a few things here or there. But if you're someone kind of on the right and you're assuming that people are always looking for opportunity to steal or take what's not theirs, on the right you're kind of saying we need more rules that guard against that as a consequence. And then people will refrain from doing what they naturally may want to do, right? Whereas on the slightly left side of things, they might say, well, there's got to be a reason why somebody wants to take something that doesn't belong to them without paying. So what's that reason that creates that desire to steal or temptation to steal? And let's fix that situation, right? And so you see here that we have the same circumstance, the same behavior in society, and 2 different perspectives in how to deal with it. And actually, why don't we write that down somewhere so that you could remember that? We could go down here. So we could take, this is the event, would be like shoplifting, for example. And so one perspective is that people are mostly bad and would steal if they could. So we create hard consequences to avoid theft. That's one perspective. And again, it's based on the assumption that people are more bad than good. If given opportunity, most people would steal And for that reason, our social contract, our agreement, says if you steal, you have a harsh punishment. That's the consequence based on our perspective sitting just to the right, okay? But another perspective believes people do the best they can in their situations. So that's the perspective on human nature. People are trying their best. So they would want to fix a situation that leads someone to desire stealing. Do you mind? Thanks. So this is how different perspectives, different ideas about the world and the people in it lead to different social contracts. This here is a social contract, right? And this here is a social contract. Just so you're clear on SC. And we've already discussed this. You already gave me feedback on where you sat on this. Was it Friday that we did that? I think, or Wednesday that we did it, I think? Yeah.
I don't know what side I'd be on because that's the day I wasn't here.
Oh, so you missed the whole thing. And we recorded it, but we didn't have sound.
Oh, funny question.
Yes, the big discussion there, okay? So whatever a person or political party assumes about people's behavior is going to influence the rules that they construct in their social contract. If a party or political party thinks the people are generally evil, then they'll say, okay, people need harsh penalties so that they'll avoid committing crimes. How many of you know what this word means? Deter.
Oh, like to keep
yeah.
away or to keep them from doing.
To keep you from doing it. So, for example, some people in the States, not necessarily in Canada anymore, but some people in the States, because it's still legal in the States, believe that they'll have the death penalty. And the idea is not that, okay, well, people will kill whoever they want to kill and then they'll die as a consequence. The idea of having such a harsh, significant penalty is as deterrent. You'll commit whatever crimes you want to commit, but you'll make every effort not to take the life of somebody because you'll know that in your state the consequence is death, and most people want to avoid death, right? And so that's an example where in the US, you could put as an example here, US states still use the death penalty as a hopeful, and I'm putting that word in on purpose, deterrent to those crimes. The intent is to have such a significant penalty that most people will avoid the crimes that would require those consequences. And that tells you that they think people are generally evil and would commit those crimes without that harsh penalty. And so it's their assumption about human nature that's dictating the social contract, the laws in their state. There are other states that do not allow the death penalty. And let's talk about Canada, because we like to compare since you're so aware of American politics. But let's talk about Canada. Canada has removed the death penalty. Canada has also increased harsh penalties for other types of fines or created new laws for behaviors that didn't exist 15 years ago. There is now a criminal offense that you can violate if you like try to lure somebody online, or if you counsel someone to commit suicide. That's now a criminal offense. It wasn't something that was really an option 20 or 30 years ago. You know, somebody might talk to another person face to face and like the control and manipulation of encouraging someone to commit that offense, but there wouldn't have been evidence of it before. But now we have chat rooms, now we have social media, now we have text messaging. And so there are people out there who, for their own mental control and manipulation, deterrent. Yep. And it's a case that you could study in the law course if you ever took it. There was a young girl in Ontario who was struggling with mental health issues after she left home and went to college, and she was in some online chat groups, and some of the groups talked about, you know, desires for suicide. And the idea was that they were a support group, that they would encourage each other to look at the positive, to just get through one more day. If they thought somebody was in danger of harming themselves, they would try to contact somebody that they knew directly or things like that. And that this young girl formed a friendship or relationship with someone who she thought, this person online claimed that they were a female nurse from some certain state in the US. And the two of them created a suicide pact. They developed a relationship, but they created a suicide pact where they both believed they were kind of at the same place. And I'll do it on this night. If you do it, we'll do it together. And the person that was this online female nurse counseled and encouraged this girl. This is when we'll do it. This is where you'll do it. This is the type of rope you should buy. This is how you tie it up. She gave all those instructions and claimed that that person online was going to do the same. In the end, that young girl did take her life, but she did it in a different manner. But somebody else who was part of that support group, who had lost a family member to suicide, kind of noticed the relationship between the two and caught a glimpse at one time when this nurse, female nurse, came into their chat room. Her video camera came on, and for a moment she saw, and it was a man. And so this person who was alerted to that had tried to contact other people to say, this person isn't representing themselves as who they think they are, and then found out that the young girl had hurt herself. So she was from like the UK, she was from Wales or Ireland or something like that, and she called all sorts of different places to try to track down, because this girl never came back online, and finally was able to make contact with a certain police group, and the profile of this young girl made sense in the timeline. And she gave them the information on the screenshot of the man's image. And they were able to track through the IPS. And this is something that hadn't really happened before. And if it did, nobody was aware of it. What are our laws there for? To protect us from the crimes that can be committed against us. New technology means new ways or tools to use against people to commit crimes. There is now a law in Canada against that type of online predatory behavior. And it went to court. And since the offense happened in Canada, that person was tried. It was a man. He was a nurse, but it was a man. And he did this with a few other people as well. So, again, it comes back to, what do you think people are mostly like? Does society need fixing? Or are people just, people are who they are? Evil nature, and we need protecting against from each other. Again, it decides which party you're going to vote for, because those parties may change the minimum and maximum penalties, right? All those things come back and affect politics again. If your party thinks, though, people can work together and they can overcome bad behavior, for example, if you take someone who's been a criminal and done time, for example, are you someone in a political group, for example, that thinks they're just bound to commit another crime again because human nature is evil, people are bound to do bad things if they can get away with it? Or are you in a group system that believes something needs to be done to fix the environment of that person, to support them better, because healthy, supported individuals don't go out carrying crimes? It's unlikely that any one of you can you just imagine any of you committing serious crimes?
Well,
Because You're not gonna go out, and because for you don't need a criminal consequence because your family name would be tarnished. Don't you walk around and pay close attention to that?
Really?
Who said no? No?
No.
You don't think it would?
Pay attention to the consequences of social destruction to yourself.
Yes, it would ruin your reputation, but I think a part of that comes from that you are from this family, from this community. It would reflect badly on them, right? Yeah. What happened? I missed something.
No. But from what I'm getting from that, like if Marissa murdered Lucas.
No.
And I heard like Marissa Townsend
Yes.
and Topanga Townsend, I'd be like, oh, stay away from me. Like you're related to serial
Oh,
killer.
yeah. You would think that similar behaviors come from a similar background or environment, maybe, right? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Why me?
Yeah. Really random. Okay.
Lucas.
But coming back to this again, there are some people in political parties that think that society needs the changing and adjusting. Society needs to do better to offer opportunities to people, and then nobody is out there needing to commit crimes. If nobody is homeless, if people have a basic education, if everybody has a job, if everybody has a place to live, who's committing crimes? There may be committing domestic crimes, but then is there adequate counseling out there? Are there enough services and supports out there that people aren't committing, developing addictions? On this side of things, they're looking to heal society. And so they would focus on homelessness, addictions, education, job training, counseling. Right? Does that make sense? So you could look at different, now we can't look at provinces in Canada because our criminal law is the same throughout the country. But the United States is a different example of that. Or countries in Europe, for example, where each country individually makes their own laws. Finland or places like that, right? What is their response to crime? What types of deterrence do they have? But also what types of social supports? So if society is healthy, you don't need these serious deterrents to crime. And that's the idea, that it depends on what you think of human nature, what you think of your society, which will dictate where you spend your money. Are you going to spend your money on a justice system that houses criminals, spends millions of dollars for criminals on death row? It's expensive to kill somebody in the States, as opposed to just keep them in a jail cell for the rest of their lives. There's a cost to all of those things. So what are you spending your money on as a society? It depends on your ideas of what people are like, what society is generally like. Does this make sense? The examples should help it make sense. So political parties have to think about, do they think people are selfish, untrustworthy? Do they need more discipline imposed on them? Or do they think that people are pretty reasonable, ready to respect each other? And again, it relates to where they would spend their money. For example, in Saskatoon, there are conversations related to that. Should money go towards opioid addicts and helping them wean themselves off their drug addictions? Or should that money go towards more police officers in the city center where people are drugged up and sitting there with their fixes? And your idea of people is going to decide which of those two things you think will be better served, right? Put them away so we don't see them. If they continue to make those choices and buy those drugs and have those reactions, that's on them and there's a consequence. Or heal the issue to start with, provide counseling, provide opium that's not tainted from some drug seller.
I still do think that they should be doing their time, but at the same time, they should be getting help in prison. Like, they should get at least counselors to come and help them while they're in prison.
Yeah.
They still have to do their time, but they need help. They can't just sit and.
So it shouldn't only be consequence every time. It should also be some support to help avoid the behavior in the future.
Avoid them getting out of jail and doing the same thing again.
Support and consequence would be one way to go.
Support and consequence would come, it's an answer that comes from someone that sits more center on that issue. Yeah. Do you have something to say, Ava? Sorry, I just want to catch. You're thinking of potatoes?
When I think of Idaho, I think of potatoes.
Okay, I don't know where we got Idaho from.
Ava.
Are you okay?
Okay. But this is a good question.
That's good.
Why don't you, you got yourself space, because I was going to ask you a question here. For yourself, what assumptions do you have of human behavior? Do you think that people are basically good or evil? Do you think that people need controls and restrictions on them? Or do you think if people are left on their own, they'd be pretty good to each other? And if I gave you space here, if the question was money to police drug addicts or counsel, and I'm just thinking of like social support. You could write your answer in here if you've got space. And that answers that whole question for me from you. Whatever your answer is to this question, do you think that money should go to the police, to housing people who are drug addicts, to having consequences, arresting them, that kind of stuff? Or do you think that money would be better spent in counseling services while they are in prison, or more street counselors, police officers that are working as social liaisons to develop the relationships, identify people that are needing help, and then try to support them before they become addicts or stuff like that? So you can write your answer in there. And it's not you're not a good or bad person for having a different opinion. So just be clear. Just write down, what you're thinking. I'm leaning towards this, or I'm thinking about this for this reason. You could write that in there. Hey, Chris has just joined us, I think. I don't think you've been here for very long. Chris, have you been here for a while?
I've been here for the whole class.
Oh, gosh.
I just got a new puppy, that's why.
Oh.
Sent me a picture.
Chris, say hi.
Hi.
Hold on here, wait. Oh, try it again.
Hi.
Ah, there you go. Okay, I'm going to stop recording here.